And in this way, allowing the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Simply allowing the breath to flow naturally and effortlessly. And releasing all activities of the mind. Releasing any thoughts that may arise. And simply allowing the mind to come to rest. To come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. And then whilst maintaining that basis of a relaxed body and a relaxed mind, simply start to notice the rhythm of your breath. Noticing if it's long or short, deep or shallow, slow or fast. Without trying to modify it in any way. And again, here the emphasis is on relaxation, using the out-breath as an opportunity to relax and release any tightness or tension in the body, and to release any thoughts that arise in the mind. Very gently noticing the rhythm of the breath. And if you get distracted from the breath, the first thing to do is simply relax. Then release the distraction and very gently return to noticing the rhythm of the breath. Relax, release, and return. Each time you become distracted, simply keep coming back to the breath again and again, patiently and happily. Noticing the rhythm of the breath.
Echo.
And we can bring the meditation to a close. So let's just start with a short review. So this shamatha practice we're doing today, the word shamatha is a Sanskrit term. Shama means calm. Ta means to remain or abide. So shamatha is the practice of simply cultivating a calm, clear, focused mind, a mind that is not only calm, but it's abiding single-pointedly, i.e. focused single-pointedly on an object. So it's developing our attention skills. And we saw in the last session, there are a number of benefits for this practice, a lot of daily life benefits as well. This practice is the basis of all other meditation practices, but simply doing this practice means that we're going to be more focused, more effective in everything we do in our life, much less stress and agitation, much better sense of inner sense of well-being, peace. And also we'll start to become the masters of our mind instead of being the slaves of our mind. And we'll enjoy simple pleasures in life much more as well. And we saw here that traditionally in the meditation texts, there are two qualities we're cultivating in this practice: stability and clarity, meaning a stable mind, a mind that can focus without becoming distracted, but also a clear mind, a mind that can focus in a very clear way, overcoming any dullness. But we added this third quality of relaxation that often you don't see in the meditation texts, because I think it didn't need to be emphasized historically. But I think that's something we really need to pay attention to in the modern world. Because again, due to our lifestyle, we have a lot of agitation, tension, and our minds tend to be quite chaotic. And then when we come into meditation, we also have this striving mind. We need to push hard to get some results. And then we apply a lot of tension in practice, in this shamatha practice and other practices. And unfortunately, by applying some tension, we can develop a little bit of stability and clarity, but then we get distracted. And then we think, well, the reason I got distracted is I didn't hold it hard enough. So we come back and we clamp down harder. And then that's not sustainable, because we're going to get exhausted, get very agitated. So the first thing we need to do in this practice, and any practice, is relax, relax, relax. Very relaxed body, relaxed mind. The more relaxed we are in the body and the mind, the better this practice will go. The more sustainable any stability and clarity we have will be. Just like this analogy of the tree. If we first don't sink deep roots of relaxation, the tree of shamatha will keep falling over constantly. So first sink those deep roots of relaxation. And in terms of what to focus on in this practice, Alan Wallace in his Attention Revolution book recommends 3 variations: the breath, observing the mind, and resting in awareness. Each one of those, as we saw in the last session, has its own unique benefits for us in the modern world. But as a Sangha said, that if we really have a type of mind that's really caught up in a lot of obsessive compulsive thinking, then probably the best object to use for us, at least initially, will be the breath. And so that's where we're starting today. That's what we're focusing on today. And so then we can ask, well, what tools do we use in this practice? And here we can begin with a quote from a great Indian Buddhist master, Bhavaviveka, in the 6th century. He said, "The out of control elephant of the mind is to be bound to the firm post of the observed object using the rope of mindfulness and gradually brought under control by the hook of introspection." And so here we see part of the diagram describing the stages of progress in Shamatha practice, and we'll look at that this afternoon a little bit. And so here in this diagram, the elephant is symbolizing our mind. And as Bhavaviveka said, generally now our elephant of our mind is really out of control. It's caught up in all sorts of distractions and tension and agitation and so forth. And we are trying to bring this elephant of our mind under control. And we see here the meditator, they have two objects. In their left hand, they have a rope, and in the right hand, they have a hook. And they're the two tools the meditator uses. And the rope is symbolizing mindfulness, meaning that we are tying our mind with the rope of mindfulness to the object. And then we need the hook of introspection. Introspection is quality control, is to notice, are we still holding the object or are we becoming dull or distracted? And if we become dull or distracted, to hook the mind back to the object. So these are the two tools we use. Let's look at each of those in a little bit more detail. Firstly, this word mindfulness that we're using here is a translation of the Sanskrit term smrti or the Pali term sati. And both of those terms literally mean to remember. So mindfulness here is defined as the faculty of sustaining voluntary attention continuously upon a familiar object without forgetfulness or distraction. So it's really our ability to hold the object, to not forget it, to not become distracted. And so this is what we see also again in the Sangha. He says, what is mindfulness? The non-forgetfulness of the mind with respect to a familiar object having the function of non-distraction. So that's mindfulness, is just simply our ability to hold the object, to remember it, to not become distracted. What we need to be aware of is that in a lot of modern day mindfulness traditions, they have redefined the word mindfulness to mean something a little bit different. And in a lot of modern traditions, you find that the word mindfulness is defined as something like a non-judgmental awareness of whatever is arising in the present moment. This is how often the word mindfulness is used in a lot of modern traditions. Again, nothing wrong with that, but that's not really how the word mindfulness is originally used in the Buddhist texts. So just to be aware of that difference of meaning of the word mindfulness. And then the second tool here is introspection, in Sanskrit samprajanya. And introspection is really quality control. And it's really monitoring. So mindfulness is we are holding the object. Introspection is quality control, is monitoring the mindfulness. How is our mindfulness going? Are we still holding the object, or are we starting to become distracted or fall into dullness? And so here we see introspection is defined as the mental faculty having the function of monitoring the state of one's body and mind. With this faculty, we note when the mind has succumbed to either laxity or excitation. And another great Indian master, Shanti Deva, says, in brief, this alone is the definition of introspection, the repeated examination of the state of one's body and mind. So these are the two tools we use in this practice. Let's now have a look at what sort of faults can come up in this practice and how do we overcome them. And here we have a quote from a great Tibetan master, Panchen Losang Chigi Gyaltsen, from the 16th century. He says, Shamatha is attained by progressing through the 9 stages, relying on the 8 antidotes to abandon the 5 faults. So these 9 stages here we see in this windy road diagram, which we'll look at a little bit this afternoon. But here it says there are 5 main faults and there are 8 antidotes to apply to them to overcome them in practice. So let's have a look at what sorts of faults can come up in this meditation that we're doing here, the shamatha. The first one is laziness, not even sitting down to meditate. That's the first fault. Like everything in our life, if we see no benefit in a certain activity, we're going to be very lazy when it comes to doing it. So similarly, if we don't really appreciate the benefits of this practice, we're going to be very lazy when it comes to doing the practice. So therefore, the first antidote to that is faith. And here faith means to reflect on the benefits of shamatha practice, to understand that this practice is going to bring us a lot of benefit. And then we'll have faith that this practice will benefit us. And so then the more faith we have that this practice will benefit us, the more will lead to the second antidote, aspiration. The more we'll want to do it, the more we'll aspire to do the practice. And the more that we aspire to do the practice, the more enthusiasm and effort we'll actually put into the practice. And then the more effort and enthusiasm we put into the practice, the more we're going to have the fourth antidote called pliancy. Pliancy means flexibility or serviceability of body and mind. Now our body and mind are not very pliant or flexible or serviceable because we often have a lot of aches and pains in the body and we have a lot of resistance in our mind to the practice. But as we go deeper into this practice, this will become less problem in the body, less resistance in the mind. That's pliancy, flexibility, serviceability of body and mind. The second fault is forgetfulness. And the antidote to forgetfulness is mindfulness. And here forgetfulness can mean either forgetting the instructions or forgetting the object. And so be mindful of the instructions, mindful of the object, hold the object with mindfulness to overcome forgetfulness. Then the third fault is the pair of laxity and excitation, which are the technical terms for dullness and distraction. So these are the two main imbalances in this practice. And the antidote here is introspection, quality control. Introspection's job is to notice, are we falling into laxity or dullness? Are we going off into excitation or distraction? And then correcting that fault. And then the fourth fault here is non-application. Non-application means we've noticed that we've become dull or distracted, but we don't do anything about that. That's a problem. So the antidote to that is application, which generally means if we're falling into dullness or falling into distraction, simply reapply mindfulness to the object. That's application. But then the fifth fault is over-application. This is not really a big problem for us as beginners, but it could become a problem later in the practice when we get more into the practice. And over-application means that we are actually focusing on the object well, but we are unnecessarily adjusting our focus. That's over-application. So the antidote to that is equanimity. And here equanimity means balance. Our mind is already balanced, just leave it as it is. So the saying here for the fifth one is, if it's not broken, don't fix it, just leave it as it is. That's equanimity. And again, a quote from Tsongkhapa here regarding the first one, laziness. He says, if you cannot stop the laziness of being disinclined to cultivate concentration and of enjoying things that are not conducive to it, from the outset, you will not gain entry into concentration. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. But this is very common. And this is really a lot to do with our worldview. If our worldview is that the source of my happiness is out there, then, and particularly pleasant things out there, then we're going to be very lazy when it comes to doing shamatha practice. Because if we sit down in shamatha practice and focus on the breath, very little stimulus, certainly no pleasant stimulus there. That's just so boring, so boring. Why am I doing this practice? I could be out enjoying life and having a good time. It's just so boring. And then we're going to be very lazy when it comes to do this practice. So here, what Tsongkhapa is saying is that if we really want to overcome this, we need to shift that worldview. We need to really understand the source of happiness is not anywhere out there. It lies within our own mind. And actually, this practice is the key that opens the door to genuine happiness, inner well-being. If we understand that, we're not going to be lazy doing this practice. And we'll talk more a bit about that later. But now I'd like to briefly, before we go back to the meditation, is talk about a little bit more in detail these two main imbalances in this practice of laxity and excitation, what they are and how we really overcome them. And so here, as we saw briefly earlier, the elephant is the mind, and the black color on the elephant is symbolizing laxity. And so here again, Tsongkhapa, in his Shamatha part of his Lam Rim, he defines laxity. He says, laxity means that your mind's way of apprehending the object of meditation is slack. It does not apprehend the object with much vividness or firmness. So laxity really means our mind is sinking. Our mind is sinking in meditation. We're not seeing the object clearly. And here we can talk about 3 levels of laxity. The most coarse level of laxity, is when it says here, the attention mostly disengages from the object due to insufficient vividness. So coarse laxity means our mind is sinking so much that we're sort of completely disconnecting from the object, and we just ended up in this very dull state where we're completely spaced out. Nothing's really registering at all. Extreme laxity would be where we actually fall asleep in meditation. That's extreme laxity. Then we can talk about medium level of laxity. That's when we're focusing on the object. The object appears, but with not much vividness. So we're like focusing on the breath. It's there, we notice it, but it's a bit sort of hazy. It's not very clear. We sort of notice some sort of sensations there, but they're not very clear at all. Subtle laxity, it says the object appears vividly, but the attention is slightly slack. So that means, for example, we're focusing on the breath, we're noticing the sensations of breath quite clearly, but our attention is still a little bit slack. There's still a little bit of sinking. As a beginner, we won't notice that at all. That will refine later. When we get into deeper of the practice, we'll start to notice that there still is a little bit of sinking there. Now we have to deal with the more coarse level, falling asleep, getting completely drowsy, completely disconnecting, or we're sort of there, but not really. Those we need to overcome first. Those subtle levels we deal with later as we get further into the practice. How do we overcome this laxity? How do we overcome the mind sinking, becoming dull and drowsy? So we can talk about 3 strategies here. The first line strategy, and again, this is coming from Tsongkhapa, he says, tighten up your apprehension of the object and continue meditating. That is, if you notice your mind starting to sink, just refresh your attention, sharpen your focus on the object, particularly on the in-breath. On the out-breath, good for relaxation. In-breath is good if you notice sinking to really uplift the mind, sharpen the focus without becoming tense. And here we have these 3 words: refresh, restore, retain. Refresh your interest in the practice, restore your attention on the object, and then retain an ongoing flow of mindfulness. And we'll talk about those 3 words shortly a little bit more. So that's the first line strategy. Start sinking, just sharpen the focus. But let's say we're doing that, but we still keep sinking, and we're sinking quite a lot. The next backup strategy, if the first line strategy is not really working, is, as Shantideva says, inspire yourself by cultivating delight. Because if we're sinking quite a lot in meditation, it's probably because we've simply lost interest in the practice. So then what to do is shift from the object, from the breath, and inspire the mind by cultivating delight, by, for example, reflecting on the benefits of this practice. Briefly reflect on the benefits of the practice to inspire the mind, to uplift the mind, to make it more joyful. Then go back to focusing on the breath. So that's the backup strategy if the first one's not working. But let's say we're doing that, trying to uplift the mind. Even that's not working. The mind is really just completely sinking. No matter what we do, we can't get it uplifted and sharp. Then Tsongkhapa says, suspend your cultivation of concentration, means stop the meditation, and then get up, and he says, clear away laxity and then resume your meditation. In this regard, Asanga suggests such activities as going for a walk and washing your face with water, because there's no point in staying in meditation and being completely half asleep. And you can't fix that, because then you're actually increasing the very faults you want to decrease. So if you can't uplift the mind, sharpen the mind using one of the first two strategies, and you're really just stuck in that very heavy, dull state, the last ditch strategy, stop the meditating. But that doesn't mean as soon as you get drowsy, stop meditating. That's not first line strategy. That's the sort of last approach. We got two more approaches first. And then Tsongkhapa says, here is the most important remedy for stopping laxity. When you reflect on the benefits of bodhicitta, the aspiration for enlightenment for the welfare of others, and the great significance of attaining leisure, meaning to reflect on the fact that we've got a precious human life full of opportunity. If we reflect on things like this, it said it should have a bracing effect on your mind. This depends on having had experience with discerning analytical meditation on these beneficial topics. So what Tsongkhapa is saying is the most important remedy for laxity is, again, to develop enthusiasm for the practice, to understand that this practice is really the gateway to genuine happiness and inner well-being. And that's really going to uplift the mind. If we're not enthusiastic about this practice, then we're going to really continually fall into dullness and laxity. Let's now look at excitation. And here in the diagram, the monkey is symbolizing discursive thought in general, and the black color is symbolizing excitation. And excitation is the most common form of distraction. And so Tsongkhapa says, what is excitation? It is an unquiet state of mind, considered a derivative of attachment, which pursues pleasant objects and acts as an impediment to shamatha. So again, as I mentioned earlier, we're sitting there focusing on the breath, and then our mind of attachment is going, oh, this is so boring, so boring. I need some stimulus. I need some pleasant. What? Oh, yeah, that's pleasant. I'll think about that. Oh, that's really not. Oh, that's much better. Oh, yeah. So this is excitation, most common form of distraction. We are pulled away by something pleasurable. And there are also three levels of this excitation distraction. Coarse is when we get completely distracted from the object. Medium level of excitation is here, as it says, involuntary thoughts occupy the center of attention while the meditative object is displaced to the periphery. And so that is like, let's say we're focusing on the breath, we're noticing sensations of the breath, but then we start thinking about, oh, what do I need to do later today? Or no, what am I going to make for dinner tonight? And we're thinking about that. That's where our main focus, but still a little bit, we're noticing the breath. That's medium excitation. So we haven't completely lost the breath, but we're mainly thinking about something else and just a little bit in the corner of our mind, noticing the breath. Then subtle excitation, it says the meditative object remains at the center, but involuntary thoughts emerge at the periphery. So subtle excitation would be, we're focusing on the breath. That's our main focus, but a little bit in the corner of the mind, we're sort of thinking a little bit about what we're going to have for dinner tonight, but we're mainly on the breath, a little bit of that. So that's sort of like background static. So that's subtle excitation. So these are the levels that we have to go through in progress of shamatha. So again, in the beginning level, it's probably the coarse one where we get completely distracted. That's the one that we really need to deal with first. And then as we go further into practice, we'll start to be able to deal with more and more subtle levels of excitation in the practice. How do we overcome excitation? Again, three strategies, just like laxity. First line strategy, Tsongkhapa says, when you notice you're completely distracted, it says, draw in the scattered attention and fix your attention upon the object of meditation. So a little bit like what we've been using in the meditation. If you notice you get distracted, first thing, relax, release the distraction, return to the object. So that's first line strategy. Just keep coming back to the breath, coming back to the breath, coming back to the breath. So let's say we're doing that, but we're just all the time getting distracted. Then backup strategy. Shanti Deva says, calm it by bringing impermanence to mind. Because again, if we're just constantly distracted, it's probably because our mind of attachment is really growing, going out to pleasurable stuff, just constantly grabbing pleasurable thoughts and memories and so forth. And so then we need to bring impermanence to mind. We need to bring the mind down because our mind is really agitated, seeking pleasurable things. To really reflect on that all of these things that we're craving are impermanent. They're constantly changing. They're never going to fulfill us, never going to satisfy us. And by reflecting on that temporarily, that can calm the mind. Then we go back to the meditation. But let's say that even didn't work and we're just constantly out there, constantly. Then the last ditch strategy is, again, Tsongkhapa says, it is crucial that you relax the meditation for a while. So again, if we just completely agitated the whole meditation, no point in staying in that state because we're just increasing the very fault we want to overcome. Then we just stop the meditation. And he says, cultivate a sense of disenchantment. What that means is then we stop that meditation and then we reflect on all of these things that we're chasing after with craving and attachment and see these things are never going to satisfy us, never going to fulfill us. To have a sense of disenchantment with chasing after sensory pleasures. And then you go back to the meditation. He says, do that rather than attempting to pull in your mind and direct it back to the object of meditation every time it becomes just scattered. So these, again, the three strategies. So he's not saying, as soon as our mind gets agitated, stop the meditation. No, that's the last ditch strategy. Mind gets distracted, first line strategy, relax, release, return. Just keep coming back. If you notice your mind is really getting quite agitated and very distracted, then don't focus on the object anymore. Shift your focus on impermanence. Calm the mind by seeing that these things we're chasing after are impermanent. If that's not working, then stop the meditation and really work on cultivating this sense of disenchantment to really overcome this craving and attachment that's always looking outward, chasing after sensory pleasures. Because while we have that, we're never going to get anywhere in shamatha practice. And so then the two three-word phrases that are often helpful when we begin this practice. If we get caught up in excitation and distraction, first response, relax the body and mind, release the distraction, and return to the object. Just relax, release, return. If we notice we're falling into dullness or laxity, the mind is sinking. Again, probably the most common reason that's happening is we've lost interest in the practice. Then first, refresh means restore your interest, refresh your interest in the practice, restore your attention on the object, and then retain an ongoing flow of mindfulness. So refresh, restore, retain. So let's go now to the practice we're going to do in this session. So the two meditations we've done so far is the full body and the rhythm. So that is really focusing on a large area, very good for relaxation. Now we're going to focus on the area of the abdomen. The focus on the sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as we breathe, emphasized in many Buddhist traditions. And here we're keeping the attention down, quite a large area of focus. So this is quite good for improving stability of attention to help us to overcome distraction. But again here, not at the expense of losing relaxation. So remember, keep that body and mind very relaxed. And as we saw, probably the main thing for many people is distraction. And as a beginner, often a lot of distraction. So there's a short-term strategy that you may find helpful to help overcome a lot of distraction. And that is counting the breath. So partway through this meditation, we are going to introduce this idea of counting the breath. Now, counting the breath is not part of the standard practice because it's conceptual activity. So we're actually adding something to the practice. But you may find, as a beginner, it might be helpful because if we occupy our mind with counting the breath, less space for getting caught up in other thoughts and distractions. Now, there are many ways of counting the breath. What we're going to do in this practice is we are going to count at the end of the in-breath. We mentally note 1, and then focus on the sensations of the breath on the following out-breath, and then the following in-breath. At the end of the next in-breath, mentally count 2. And then this way we'll count from 1 up to 10, and then we'll go back to 1 again. If at any time you lose the count, go back to 1. So we'll experiment with counting the breath partway through the meditation to see if it helps you to stabilize your attention. Some people find it quite helpful. Other people don't find it helpful at all. So we'll just experiment and see whether you find it helpful or not. But again, it's only a short-term strategy. It's not something that you would do as part of the normal practice. You would only introduce it if you notice a lot of distraction, constantly distracted. And then you can bring it in to settle the mind, to stabilize the mind. When the mind is more stable, then let it go again and just focus on the breath. So that's the practice we're going to do. Let's do that practice now. So finding a nice, comfortable posture. Keeping the back nice and straight. And at the same time, allow the entire body to become completely relaxed, completely at ease. And softening and relaxing all the muscles in the face. Mouth and jaw, soft and relaxed. And all the muscles around the eyes, soft and relaxed. Allowing the breathing to settle into its natural rhythm. Simply allowing it to flow naturally and effortlessly. And with each out-breath, letting go of any thoughts that may have arisen. Happily releasing them. And allowing the mind to come to rest. To come to rest in the stillness of the present moment. releasing all activities of the mind. And just rest. Allowing the mind to remain relaxed, still, and clear. And then whilst maintaining that relaxed body and relaxed mind, start to notice the sensations of the breath in the area of the abdomen. Noticing the sensations of the rising and lowering of the abdomen as you breathe. And maintaining an ongoing flow of mindfulness of the sensations of the breath throughout the entire cycle of each in and out breath. And if you notice you're falling into dullness or drowsiness, then use the in-breath as an opportunity to arouse and refresh your focus, to sharpen your focus on the breath. Let's now experiment with counting the breath to see if it helps to stabilize the attention. So remember again at the end of the in-breath, mentally note 1. And then focus on the sensations of the breath on the following out-breath, following in-breath. At the end of the next in-breath, mentally note 2. And in this way, counting from 1 up to 10, and then going back to 1 and repeating the cycle. If at any time you lose the count, simply go back to 1. So let's now experiment with counting the breath. See if it's helpful in stabilizing the attention. And we can bring the meditation to a close. One last comment and then maybe a few questions before lunch. We previously, just before the meditation, looked at some strategies to overcome laxity and excitation. But as the saying goes, prevention is the best cure. So there are a number of things we can do to reduce the likelihood of laxity and excitation, or in other words, dullness and distraction coming up in meditation. And I already mentioned a number of these in response to an earlier question, but let's have a look at this list. You may find helpful. Body. What can we do with the body to help avoid the likelihood of laxity and excitation? Again, posture is very important. If we don't have a good posture, if our back is sort of like this, then we're probably just going to fall into dullness, drowsiness. If we don't have a good posture, aches and pains, we're just going to get caught up in distraction, on getting caught up in the aches and pains in the body. Eyes. Again, with eyes closed, probably fall into laxity, so have them slightly open. Or if we're the sort of person normally gets more agitated than dull, maybe you need to close them. So that you can experiment with. Also, head position. If you find that you're falling into dullness, elevate. If you're getting agitated, lower. So we can adjust that as well. Diet. Sleep, I mentioned before. Many of us just don't get enough sleep. And we try and meditate in the morning and we're just getting very drowsy. So we need to make sure we get enough sleep. Also, diet and exercise. You know, modern diet, often not very good. Refined foods, a lot of sugar, things like that, not helpful for meditation. And then exercise. We need to have a well-functioning body to support the mind. Environment. One of the biggest reasons for getting distracted as a beginner is noise. So when you're meditating at home, try and find a quiet location. If you can't, if you're in a very noisy location, generally, I would recommend noise-cancelling headphones. I use them quite a lot when I'm in noisy environments. I find them very helpful. Temperature. Too warm, drowsiness. Too cold, agitation. Light. Maybe too much light, agitation. Too dark, drowsiness. So these are things we can control at home a little bit. Length of session. Always emphasize quality over quantity. People often feel like they need to meditate longer. But if we can't sustain meditating longer sessions, all that's going to happen in the latter half of the meditation, you're just going to give up effort and you're just going to either drift into complete dullness or complete daydreaming. And so then you're actually increasing the very faults you want to decrease. So don't meditate too long. Quality over quantity. And also it's very good, helpful as a beginner to use a meditation timer. How long to meditate will depend on us, our own capacity as a beginner. Some people may find that 10, 12 minutes, 15 minutes, 20. Some people meditate longer, 30, 40, an hour, but always emphasize quality over quantity. And also, if we want to get deeper into the practice later, then if we only ever meditate, say 15 minutes every morning, we're not going to get that far. At some point, we'll need to extend how long we meditate to get further into the practice. How to know when to do that? One measure is if our normal experience when we're meditating is, I would have liked to have meditated a bit longer, that's a sign. If we're using a timer and our normal experience is we're going, when's this timer going to go off? Then we don't want to meditate longer. And timer, use a timer. Because if we don't use a timer, one of two things will probably happen. Some days we'll sit down, maybe we're not feeling well, we're agitated, we try to meditate, it's not really working, we try, and after about 5 or 10 minutes, we just give up. That's not a good habit. If we give up whenever things get difficult, we'll never progress in our life or in meditation. If we set a timer, if it's difficult, we'll persevere, and that's good because we develop the characteristic of perseverance in the face of difficulty. On other days when we're meditating with no timer, maybe things are going really well. We're enjoying, and so we keep meditating until when? Until it's not going so well, and then we stop. And the thing we remember most about meditation is how it ended. So if we're always ending in not a good state, then we're going to associate meditation with not good experiences. We're not going to be enthusiastic to meditate the following day. If we set a timer and it's going well, and then we stop, we remember that, we'll be enthusiastic to meditate the following day. So always emphasizing quality over quantity. And another thing that is very important to help prevent particularly laxity, but also excitation, is enthusiasm for the practice. If we're not enthusiastic about this practice, we're just going to fall into dullness and distraction easily. So we need to reflect on the benefits of this practice to really understand this practice is going to bring us enormous benefit. And it's really enormous benefit for daily life, and it's also the gateway to genuine happiness and inner well-being. Then we'll be very enthusiastic about meditating, then less likely to fall into dullness and distraction. And again, motivation is key. Again, if we can shift that worldview and see the source of happiness is not out there, but inside of ourselves, and this practice is the key that opens the door to that, a lot of enthusiasm. And in our motivation, very helpful to try to include others in our motivation. If we're only doing this practice for ourselves, then more likely, if things get difficult, we'll give up. Whereas if we've included others in our motivation, much more expansive motivation, and then we're more likely to persevere in the face of difficulties. So that's a few tips on how to prevent a little bit laxity, excitation. A little bit of time now for question answer before we break for lunch. So does anyone have any questions from anything we covered in this session? Yeah.
During subtle and medium excitation, there's this sense that object is present and there's this. So does that mean that the mind is actually at two objects at the same time?
Right. Yeah.
And also, we are supposed to do relax, release, return, but then we're relaxing and how can we release if we're still on the object when it's subtle? Does that make sense?
How do we release?
Because we're supposed to, if there's excitation, we say relax.
Release. Yeah.
The object is still there, so
yeah.
What are we releasing?
I'll answer that first. So relax, release, return. The relax is just to counter our normal habit now of tensing, because when we get distracted, we tense so that's to stop that. And then release just means stop paying interest to that, whatever's distracting you. It doesn't mean push it away or suppress it. Release just means stop paying attention to it. It can still be there, but we're not paying attention. Instead, we're returning to the object. So release just means stop focusing on it, and then instead focus back on the breath. That's all. And then the other thing, the question was, with this medium level or subtle level of excitation, it seems like we're focusing on two things at once. Experientially, it may seem like that, but actually, technically, that's impossible. So actually what's happening is in a short period of time, maybe in 1 or 2 seconds, we are going from this to there, this to there. We're just going backwards and forwards. And so actually our attention is very fragmented. And so what we're trying to do over these medium and subtle levels of excitation is trying to cut down that fragmentation to nothing, to no fragmentation, so that we're 100% time on the object, like the breath. With medium excitation, that fragmentation means we're going backwards and forwards quickly, but a lot of the time, maybe 75% or 80% of the time, we're on a distraction, 20% of that time on the object. Subtle excitation, 80% of the time on the object, 20% on the distraction. But again, we're not focusing on two things at once. We're going backwards and forwards very quickly. So it's very fragmented, our attention. So we need to reduce that. Okay.
Which text is this explained, by the way?
What's that?
The fact that attention can only be in one object at the same time.
You'll find that in most of the texts. It's certainly in the Lam Rim, on Tsongkhapa, you'll find that, yes.
Which section?
A section I can't remember. I don't remember that well. But yeah, I mean, yeah, there is mention of that in terms of you can't focus on two objects simultaneously. You're going backwards and forwards very quickly. Okay. Any other questions? Sure, ask away. Yeah.
So sometimes I feel like, my practice, like the Shamatha is going well. Actually, I've been listening to your YouTube and the
Sure.
Jishita meditation.
Sure.
And then sometimes I feel like it's going well. And then the next day, it's just like, I don't know, it's so bad because of like external conditions. So even if I do it every day, am I like getting somewhere?
Right. Her question is that some days, meditation's practice is going really well, but then suddenly next day it's just all over the place. Yeah, that's okay. That's fine. Because what we need to be careful of here is how we see what is a good meditation and what is a bad meditation. Often people, when I hear people talking amongst themselves, they go, oh, today my meditation was really good. My mind was really focused. Or another time, oh, my meditation today was really bad, really awful. My mind was all over the place. If this is our idea of good and bad meditation, we're in trouble because we're really caught in sort of hope and fear, hoping for nice experiences or worrying or fearing about unpleasant experiences. So, I mean, from day to day, as you mentioned, our mind is very variable. Some days it's naturally more quiet and focused. Other days it's naturally more agitated and distracted. So actually a good meditation is simply any meditation where we, to the best of our ability, try to follow the instructions no matter what happens.
Not looking at it dualistically as a good or bad.
Well, no, a good meditation is simply whenever we try to follow the instructions, no matter what experience we have. A bad meditation is when we sit down and we just let the mind do whatever it wants and we don't try to follow the instructions.
But even like sitting is good, right? Better than not sitting.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have to get in daily habits, yeah. So that's very important. But also the other thing we need to realize is that progress is not measured from day to day or week to week or even month to month, really. It's long term. So in the short term, as you said, you'll notice a lot of variations, a lot of ups and downs. We have this expectation that, this week my meditation should be at least as good as last week. Maybe it should be even a little bit better. But in the short term, a lot of variation. Long term, you should notice some change. So have a long-term perspective as well. Okay. Then we have a question online. I think it was Navita. So Navita can ask away. I think you have to get unmuted here.
Hi, thanks. I couldn't unmute.
No, okay, Navita, you're on.
Thank you. I had a question about resting the attention on the abdomen versus the nostrils. When I had used to rest my attention in the nose, I found I had a lot of lung problems and a lot of distraction. So then I moved to the abdomen, but I feel like my concentration is not as sharp at the abdomen as it was at the nostrils. So I want to shift back, but I'm not sure how can I avoid that lung problem again and overstimulus?
Yep. Very good question, and I will answer that in more detail this afternoon, but short answer now. So the question is that she finds that she has much better clarity of attention on the nostrils, but you end up with what's called lung, which is a Tibetan word, which means basically sort of a subtle energy imbalance. It's basically gets very agitated state of mind. But with the abdomen, not so clear. So that's where she is now, but what to do? So again, we saw here with these three qualities, relaxation, stability, clarity. We need to cultivate them in this order. So first the relaxation, then stability, and then clarity. Now, what we'll find is that, yes, it's easier to focus, to develop clarity using the nostrils because we bring the attention up and much smaller area of focus. But the danger is we tense, we tighten. So we don't want to be cultivating clarity at the expense of losing relaxation. So I wouldn't be in a hurry to get to the nostrils just because you can be more clear than in the abdomen, but rather really work on that basis of relaxation and then the stability and then the clarity. So you can go back to nostrils, but if you're not super relaxed, then you need to go back down to the abdomen and really work on that relaxation. So again, don't be in a hurry to get to nostrils just because you can get a bit of clarity, but at the expense of losing relaxation. So I would be a little bit cautious there, because otherwise, like you said, you're just going to get very agitated, and that's not going to be very helpful. So patience. Okay, so let's leave it there. We've run over time a little bit, but let's break there for lunch. So it's 12:30 here, just after 12:30. So I think we're coming back at 1:45. So let's take a break. So about an hour and 10-minute break, and then we'll see you back at 1:45.